The transport ship landed on the frozen moon with a loud crash. Ice flew everywhere as the engines shut down. Jake Morrison grabbed his gear bag and looked out the small window. Everything was white. Snow covered the ground as far as he could. See? The sky was dark gray and cold wind howled outside. "Welcome to Kepler 442c, said Professor Zixtal in a voice that sounded like breaking glass. The alien teacher stood at the front of the ship. His body looked like a tall crystal tower with many sharp edges. Blue light glowed from inside him. "This moon will teach you about ice geology better than any classroom." Jake pulled his thick coat tighter. He was one of 5 students on this trip. The others came from different worlds across the galaxy. Lisa Carter sat next to him. She was also human and studied alien life forms. Her breath made small clouds in the cold air. Behind them sat 3 alien students. Quindar breathed methane gas through tubes in his nose. His green skin looked thick, like rubber. Velona had a body made of living rock that changed colors from red to purple. Hooptar had 8 arms and big round eyes that moved in different directions. "The temperature outside is minus 160 degrees, Professor Zixtal said. His crystal fingers pointed at a screen showing numbers. "Your suits will keep you warm for 6 hours. That gives us enough time to explore the frozen labyrinth." Jake had read about this place before the trip. The frozen labyrinth was a huge cave system under the ice. Scientists said it held rare crystals that formed only in extreme cold. But something felt wrong about this mission. The professor had changed their plans 3 times in the past week. Each time he made the trip longer and more dangerous. "Sir, why did we bring so much equipment for a simple cave tour?" Jake asked. He pointed at the boxes of machines and tools they had loaded. "This looks like enough gear for a month-long expedition." Professor Zixtal's blue light flickered. "Good students ask questions, Jake Morrison. You will understand soon enough." The group put on their environmental suits and left the ship. The cold hit them like a wall even through the protective clothing. Wind pushed snow into their faces. Jake could barely see 10 feet ahead. They walked across the frozen ground toward a dark opening in the ice. The cave entrance looked like a giant mouth ready to swallow them. Professor Zixtal led the way with a bright light attached to his crystal body. "Stay close together," the professor called out. "This cave system goes down for miles. Students have been lost here before." Jake noticed something strange about that comment. Why would the university send students to a place where others had been lost? He looked at Lisa and saw the same worried expression on her face. The cave entrance was bigger than it looked from outside. Their lights showed ice walls that stretched up into darkness. Strange formations hung from the ceiling like frozen teeth. The temperature got even colder as they went deeper. "Look at these ice crystals," Professor Zixtal said. He stopped at a wall covered in blue and white formations. They form when water freezes at exactly minus 173 degrees, very rare in the galaxy. Quindar's breathing tubes made loud hissing sounds. "Professor, my suit readings show the temperature is still dropping. How much colder will it get?" "Do not worry about the cold," the professor answered. "Your suits are designed for much worse conditions." But Jake saw Quindar's suit display flashing yellow warning lights. The methane-breathing alien was already having trouble with the extreme temperature. Velona's rock body had started to turn a darker color, which meant stress for her species. Even Hooptar's 8 arms moved more slowly than usual. They continued deeper into the cave system. The passages became narrower and the ice walls closed in around them. Professor Zixtal stopped often to point out different crystal formations. Each time he did this, he seemed to check a small device on his wrist. "This is the main chamber," the professor said as they entered a huge open space. Ice columns reached from floor to ceiling. The walls were covered in crystals that reflected their lights like mirrors. "We will set up our equipment here and begin detailed studies." Jake helped unpack the machines while trying to understand why they needed so much gear. There were sample collectors, energy scanners, and communication devices. But there were also things that did not make sense for a geology trip. He saw medical monitoring equipment and what looked like observation cameras. "Professor, what are these monitors for?" Lisa asked. She held up a device that measured heart rate and body temperature. Scientific research requires careful measurement of all conditions, Professor Zixtal replied. His crystal body pulsed with brighter blue light. We must monitor how the extreme environment affects different species. That answer made Jake more suspicious. This was supposed to be a geology field trip, not a medical experiment. He began to notice other strange things. The professor kept checking sealed passages that led deeper into the cave. He also carried equipment that Jake had never seen before. How long have you been bringing students to this location? Jake asked. Professor Zixtal turned his crystal head toward the human student. The blue light inside him flickered faster, long enough to know exactly what happens here, he said in his glass-breaking voice. The way he said those words made Jake's skin crawl. Something was very wrong with this trip. He looked around the ice chamber and noticed that all the passages they had used to enter were behind them. There was only one way deeper into the cave system ahead. Jake quietly moved closer to Lisa and whispered, "Keep your eyes open. I think we're in trouble." Lisa nodded and pretended to study her equipment. The alien students continued setting up machines without noticing the humans' concern. Professor Zixtal watched everything with his strange, glowing eyes. The trap was about to close, but Jake Morrison was ready to fight back. Professor Zixtal waited until all the students finished setting up their equipment. His crystal body glowed brighter as he walked to the center of the ice chamber. Jake watched the alien teacher pull out a strange device from his coat. It looked like a metal box with blinking lights. "Students, gather around," Professor Zixtal called out. "It is time for the real lesson to begin." The 5 students moved closer. Jake felt his heart beating faster. Something bad was about to happen. He could see it in the way the professor's blue light pulsed with excitement. Professor Zixtal pressed buttons on the device. Suddenly, loud humming sounds echoed through the cave. Energy barriers appeared across all the passages they had used to enter the chamber. The barriers glowed red and blocked every exit. "What is happening?" Lisa shouted. She ran toward the nearest passage but stopped when she saw the energy wall. "Professor, why are you blocking our way out?" "Because you are not leaving," Professor Zixtal said. His voice sounded different now, colder and more dangerous. "Welcome to the real experiment, students." Quindar's breathing tubes hissed louder. Experiment? This was supposed to be a geology field trip. Professor Zixtal laughed. The sound was like breaking glass. Geology was just a cover story. You are here to be test subjects in a survival study. The university wants to know how different species react when trapped in extreme conditions. Jake felt anger rising in his chest. You cannot do this to us. This is illegal. The Galactic University has special permission for this research. The professor replied. Your struggles and deaths will provide valuable data for military applications. How long can each species survive? What mistakes do they make? How do they try to escape? Velona's rock body turned dark purple with fear. Deaths? You plan to let us die here? Some of you will die, yes. That is the point of the experiment. Professor Zixtal's crystal fingers touched more buttons on his device. The temperature will continue dropping. In 2 hours, it will reach -200 degrees. Your suits can only protect you for 6 hours total. The alien students began to panic. Quindar's green skin turned pale as his methane-based body struggled with the cold. Velona's living rock started to crack at the edges. Hooptar's 8 arms shook uncontrollably. Please, Professor, Hooptar begged. My species cannot survive in such cold. My arms are already losing feeling. Your discomfort is being recorded, Professor Zixtal said without emotion. Cameras are watching everything. Medical sensors are measuring your vital signs. Every moment of your suffering adds to our knowledge. Jake looked around the ice chamber with new eyes. Now he could see the hidden cameras in the crystal formations. The medical equipment they had unpacked was not for their protection. It was to monitor them while they died. How many students have you killed this way? Lisa asked. Her voice shook with anger and fear. 17 groups over the past 3 years, the professor answered proudly. Each experiment teaches us more about species' weaknesses. Humans have lasted the longest so far, but even they eventually freeze to death. Jake's mind raced. They had perhaps 4 hours before the non-human students started dying. The professor expected them to panic and make mistakes. But Jake had grown up in Montana, where winter temperatures dropped to -40 degrees. His grandfather had taught him survival skills for extreme cold. "You made one mistake, Professor," Jake said calmly. "What mistake is that, human?" "You trapped yourself in here with us." Professor Zixtal laughed again. "I am crystalline-based. Cold does not affect me like it affects organic life forms. I can survive here for weeks while I watch you die." But Jake was already studying their surroundings. The ice chamber was large, with many crystal formations. The walls showed layers of different types of ice. Some areas looked newer than others. He noticed pockets of darker ice that might contain frozen gases. "Lisa, help me check our equipment," Jake said quietly. "Quindar, what gases do you breathe besides methane?" "Hydrogen and nitrogen," Quindar replied through his breathing tubes. "But why does that matter? We are all going to freeze." "No, we are not," Jake said with determination. "Humans do not give up easily." He began examining their scientific equipment with new purpose. There were heating elements in the sample analyzers. The communication devices had power cells. The medical monitors used energy converters. Jake started to see possibilities. "What are you planning?" Velona asked. Her rock body flickered between purple and red. "I am going to build something to get us out of here," Jake replied. He started disconnecting components from various machines. "My grandfather survived 3 days in a blizzard using only basic tools. This cave has everything I need, Professor." Zixtal watched with interest. "Humans always try to build their way out of problems. Previous human students attempted similar projects. They all failed and froze to death." "Maybe they did not have the right teacher," Jake said. He pulled apart a heating element and studied its internal parts. "My grandfather was an Alaskan trapper. He taught me that humans can survive anywhere if they think like engineers." The temperature continued dropping. Jake's breath made bigger clouds in the air. Quindar started coughing as his methane supply began to freeze. Velona's rock body developed more cracks. Hoopter's arms moved so slowly he could barely help with anything. "Jake, whatever you are planning, do it fast," Lisa urged. "Our alien friends are getting worse." Jake nodded and worked faster. He had an idea forming in his mind. It was crazy and dangerous, but it might work. The professor expected them to huddle together and slowly freeze. Instead, Jake planned to fight back with fire and steam. "Professor, you said 17 groups have died here," Jake called out while working. "But I bet none of them were human engineers with survival training." "Human arrogance," Professor Zixtal replied. "You will learn the limits of your species soon enough." But Jake was already proving him wrong, while the alien students struggled. With despair, the human was turning their prison into a workshop. His hands moved quickly despite the cold, assembling components and planning his attack on the ice barriers. The real experiment was just beginning, and Professor Zixtal was about to learn why humans had earned their reputation as the galaxy's most stubborn survivors. Jake Morrison knelt on the ice floor and spread out components from their scientific equipment. His breath came in white puffs as the temperature continued dropping. Around him, his alien classmates shivered and struggled with the extreme cold. But Jake's mind was clear and focused. "Lisa, hand me that power cell from the communication array," he said calmly. "Quindar, I need you to tell me about those dark patches in the ice walls." Quindar shuffled closer on shaking legs. His green skin had turned almost blue. "Those are methane deposits," he wheezed through his breathing tubes. "Frozen methane mixed with other organic compounds, common in caves like this." "Perfect," Jake smiled. "Velona, can your rock body detect mineral compositions in the ice?" The crystalline student pressed her hand against the cave wall. Her purple color flickered as she concentrated. "I sense carbon compounds, frozen water, and trace metals. The ice here is not pure. It contains many chemicals." Jake nodded and continued working. He had pulled apart 3 heating elements, 2 power sources, and several metal containers. His grandfather's voice echoed in his memory. When you are trapped in the cold, you need three things: fuel, heat, and shelter. Find those, and you can survive anything. What exactly are you building? Lisa asked. She helped him sort through the electronic components. A snow furnace, Jake replied. It is an old survival technique. You use compressed snow as insulation and thermal mass. Then you burn whatever fuel you can find to create intense heat in a controlled space. Professor Zixtal watched from across the chamber. His crystal body pulsed with blue light. Interesting concept, human. But you have no fuel source capable of melting energy barriers. Jake looked up at the alien teacher. You are wrong about that, Professor. This cave is full of fuel. Methane, organic compounds, even trace metals that burn hot when exposed to electrical ignition. Impossible, Professor Zixtal said. The methane is frozen solid. You cannot ignite frozen gas. Not yet, Jake agreed. But watch and learn. He began constructing his device using the metal sample containers as a base. Jake connected power cells to create an electrical heating system. Then he used wire from the communication equipment to build ignition coils. The design was simple but clever. The heating elements will warm a small chamber, Jake explained as he worked. That melts the methane deposits just enough to create gas. The electrical coils ignite the gas, creating a much hotter flame. Then I use compressed snow around the outside to contain and direct the heat. Hooptar's 8 arms barely moved as he watched. How do you know this will work? Because humans have been making fire in impossible conditions for thousands of years, Jake replied. My grandfather once melted his way out of an ice cave using nothing but matches and pine needles. Lisa helped him pack snow into a tight cylinder around the metal containers. But this is not just about making fire, is it? You are planning to melt through those energy barriers. Exactly. Jake's hands worked quickly despite the cold. Energy barriers are designed to stop physical objects and energy weapons, but they are not designed to handle sustained thermal pressure combined with steam expansion. As Jake worked, he shared more survival wisdom from his grandfather. Humans succeed because we refuse to accept defeat. Other species might be stronger or smarter, but humans adapt. We look at impossible situations and find ways to make them possible. The alien students listened with growing amazement. Even in this deadly trap, Jake remained calm and confident. He did not panic or despair like Professor Zixtal expected. Instead, he turned their prison into a workshop. In Alaska, my grandfather's motto was simple. Jake continued. Use what you have, make what you need, never give up. He pulled frozen methane deposits from cracks in the cave wall. The organic compounds looked like dirty ice crystals. Jake packed them into his heating chamber along with pieces of metal from their equipment. The methane will burn fast and hot, he explained. The metals will add thermal mass and extend the burn time. The steam from melting snow will create pressure to help crack the barriers. Professor Zixtal moved closer to observe. Your design is crude compared to our advanced technology. Maybe, Jake said as he made final connections. But crude technology built by humans has a history of beating advanced alien systems. We built spacecraft with slide rules and got to our moon. We crossed oceans in wooden boats. We survived ice, ages with stone tools. Quindar coughed weakly. Jake, my breathing is getting difficult. How much longer? Almost ready. Jake checked his connections one more time. This furnace will burn hot enough to weaken the barrier matrix. Then we punch. Through with focused steam pressure. He ignited the first heating element. Slowly, the frozen methane began to melt and turn into gas. Jake adjusted the electrical flow to control the process. Too fast and the gas would explode. Too slow and they would freeze before breaking free. There, he said, as the first flame appeared. Now we add more fuel gradually and build up heat. The small flame grew larger as Jake fed more methane into the system. The metal containers glowed red hot. Steam began rising from the melting snow insulation. The temperature around the furnace climbed rapidly. It is working, Lisa said with excitement. I can feel the heat from here. Jake smiled grimly. This is just the beginning. Now we take this weapon and melt our way to freedom. Professor Zixtal's blue light flickered with uncertainty. Even if you breach one barrier, there are multiple layers of protection. Then we will melt through multiple layers, Jake replied. He lifted the portable furnace using metal handles he had fashioned. Humans do not stop at the first obstacle. We keep going until we win. The furnace roared with intense heat as Jake carried it toward the nearest energy barrier. His alien classmates followed behind, hope replacing despair in their eyes. They were about to witness human engineering at its most determined and creative. Professor Zixtal activated more security measures, but Jake Morrison was ready for a fight. His grandfather's lessons had prepared him for exactly this moment, when survival depended on human stubbornness and the refusal to accept defeat. Jake carried his snow furnace toward the first energy barrier. The device roared with flames that shot nearly 3 feet high. Heat waves made the air shimmer around him. His alien classmates followed closely, grateful for the warmth the furnace provided. "Stay behind me," Jake called out. "When this steam hits that barrier, things might get dangerous." The energy barrier glowed red across the cave passage. It hummed with power that could stop spacecraft weapons. But Jake was not attacking it with weapons. He was using something much simpler and more persistent: heat, steam, and human determination. "Position the furnace right against the barrier base," Jake instructed Lisa. "The energy matrix is strongest at the top where it anchors to the cave ceiling. But down here, the field has to bend around the uneven ice floor." Jake had spent 20 minutes studying the barrier while building his device. He noticed that the energy field flickered slightly where it met the irregular cave floor. That tiny weakness was enough for his plan. He adjusted the furnace controls to increase the methane flow. The flames grew hotter and more intense. Steam poured from the melting snow insulation. Jake directed the steam jet directly at the point where the barrier met the ice. "What exactly is happening?" Bellona asked. Her rock body had turned from purple back to its normal red color as the furnace warmed the area. "Energy barriers need stable anchor points," Jake explained while working. "They use the cave structure to maintain their shape. But if I change that structure by melting the ice, the barrier loses stability." Steam hissed as it hit the energy field. Where the hot vapor touched the barrier, sparks flew, and the red glow flickered. Jake increased the pressure by adding more snow to his system. The steam jet became more focused and powerful. "It is working," Hooptar said with excitement. His 8 arms moved normally again in the warmer air. "The barrier is weakening at the bottom." Professor Zixtal watched from across the chamber. His crystal body pulsed faster with concern. "Impressive engineering, human. But even if you breach this barrier, there are 5 more blocking your path to the surface." "Then I will build 5 more furnaces," Jake replied without looking away from his work. "Or I will make this one portable and melt through each barrier one by one." "Your fuel supply is limited. You cannot burn methane forever." Jake smiled grimly. "Professor, you obviously never studied human history. We once crossed entire continents, burning wood and coal. We powered our first machines with steam and determination. We will find more fuel." The steam pressure finally cracked the energy barrier at its base. A gap opened just wide enough for a person to crawl through. Jake immediately began expanding the hole by directing more heat at the edges. "Quindar, squeeze through first," Jake ordered. "Your breathing is still weak and you need to get to warmer air." The methane-breathing alien crawled through the gap with difficulty. His green skin looked healthier once he reached the other side. "The passage continues deeper into the cave system," he called back, "but I can see another barrier about 50 meters ahead." Jake modified his furnace design to make it more portable. He disconnected some of the snow insulation and created handles from equipment frames. The device still burned hot but could now be carried more easily. "Everyone through," he commanded. "Lisa, help Bellona. Hooptar, watch the professor." As they moved through the gap, Professor Zixtal activated additional security measures. Cameras tracked their movements. New energy barriers appeared in passages they had not seen before. The temperature began dropping even faster. "You are making this more difficult for yourselves," the professor warned. "My systems have multiple layers of protection. Eventually you will exhaust your fuel and freeze." But Jake was already analyzing. The next barrier, while his furnace reheated. This one looked different, thicker and more stable. It would require a new approach. The second barrier has backup power feeds, he observed. But look at those ice formations around it. Those are not natural crystals. They are part of the barrier's cooling system. Lisa studied the crystal structures with her xenobiology training. You're right. These formations are artificial. They are designed to absorb heat and maintain the barrier's stability. Then we destroy the cooling system first, Jake decided. Velona, can your rock body absorb and redirect thermal energy? The crystalline student's color shifted to bright orange. Yes, my species evolved to process heat from volcanic environments. I can channel thermal energy through my body and focus it precisely. Jake repositioned his furnace to heat Velona's rock form instead of attacking the barrier directly. Her body glowed like lava as she absorbed the intense thermal energy. Then she pressed her hands against the artificial crystal formations. I'm overloading their cooling capacity, she reported. The crystals are beginning to crack from thermal stress. Within minutes, the artificial crystals shattered from the heat overload. Without its cooling system, the second energy barrier became unstable. Jake redirected his steam jet at the barrier itself, and it collapsed completely. 2 down, he said with satisfaction. 3 to go. Professor Zixtal's blue light flickered with genuine concern now. How are you adapting so quickly? Previous. Human students could not solve these puzzles. Because you designed this trap for panic and despair, Jake replied as they moved toward the third barrier. But my grandfather taught me that survival is not about being afraid. It is about staying calm and thinking clearly. The third barrier used a different technology entirely. Instead of pure energy, it combined force fields with physical ice walls. Jake studied it for several minutes before developing his next strategy. This one is clever, he admitted. It uses the ice as structural support for the energy field, but that gives me new options. He modified his furnace again, this time creating multiple smaller flame jets instead of one large one. Jake positioned these jets to melt the ice supports in a specific pattern. Humans excel at systematic problem solving, he explained while working. We break big problems into smaller pieces, then solve each piece methodically. His alien classmates watched in amazement as Jake demonstrated the human approach to engineering challenges. No matter how complex the obstacle, he remained patient and analytical. When one approach failed, he immediately tried another without losing confidence. The ice supports melted in sequence, causing the third barrier to collapse section by section. Jake's careful planning had turned a strong defense into a weakness. 3. Down 2 to go, he announced as they advanced through the wreckage. Professor, are you starting to understand why humans have survived on so many dangerous worlds? Professor Zixtal said nothing, but his crystal body pulsed with colors Jake had not seen before. The alien teacher was beginning to realize that his perfect trap had one fatal flaw. It was designed by someone who had never faced true human determination. Jake reached the fourth energy barrier and stopped. This one was different from all the others. It stretched across a wide chamber with no visible supports or cooling systems. The barrier itself glowed white-hot and seemed to generate its own power. This is the main security barrier, Professor Zixtal called out from behind them. His crystal body flickered with nervous energy. It draws power directly from the moon's core. Your primitive furnace cannot defeat it. Jake studied the barrier carefully. Steam from his furnace condensed into ice crystals when it got close to the white-hot energy field. The professor was right. This barrier was much more powerful than the others. Quindar, what do you know about methane combustion under extreme pressure? Jake asked while thinking. The alien student breathed heavily through his tubes. Methane burns much hotter when compressed. Under enough pressure, it can reach temperatures of over 2,000 degrees. But achieving that pressure requires contained explosion, Jake finished. Exactly what I was thinking. Lisa looked worried. Jake, that sounds incredibly dangerous. If you miscalculate the pressure, you could kill us all. Maybe, Jake agreed. But if I do nothing, we definitely die when our suits run out of power. Sometimes survival requires calculated risks. He began modifying his furnace for the third time. Jake removed the steam venting system and sealed the combustion chamber. Then he added more methane deposits and created a pressure release valve, using parts from their communication equipment. I am going to build up methane pressure inside the sealed chamber, he explained while working. When I release it all at once, the explosion will create a thermal shock wave. That should disrupt the barrier's power matrix long enough for us to get through. Professor Zixtal moved closer. Even if you succeed, the fifth barrier is designed specifically to stop humans. Previous test subjects never got past it. We will see about that, Jake replied grimly. He finished his modifications and checked the pressure readings. The methane gas was building to dangerous levels inside the sealed chamber. Jake positioned the device directly against the white-hot barrier. Everyone get behind that ice formation, he ordered. This is going to be loud. Jake waited until the pressure reached maximum levels, then triggered the release valve. The explosion was tremendous. The thermal shock wave hit the barrier with incredible force. For a moment, the white energy field flickered and weakened. Now, Jake shouted. Through the gap before it restabilizes. They rushed through the weakened barrier just as it began to glow white-hot again. Jake carried the remains of his furnace, which was badly damaged but still functional. The fifth and final barrier waited in the last chamber before the cave exit. When Jake saw it, he understood why previous human students had failed here. This barrier was not made of energy at all. It was pure ice, but ice so thick and hard that it might as well have been metal. 50 feet of compressed ice, Professor, Zixtal announced with satisfaction. Formed over thousands of years under extreme pressure. Your furnace cannot melt through that much mass before your fuel runs out. Jake examined the ice wall carefully. The professor was right about its thickness. But as Jake studied the surface, he noticed something interesting. The ice was not uniform. It had layers and stress fractures from its formation process. Professor, you made one mistake, Jake said calmly. What mistake is that? You assumed I would try to melt through this wall. But I am not going to melt it. I am going to shatter it. Jake repositioned his damaged furnace and began heating a specific point on the ice wall. He was not trying to melt through the ice. Instead, he was heating one small area while the rest remained frozen. Thermal expansion, Lisa realized. You are creating stress fractures by heating part of the ice while leaving the rest cold. Exactly. The heated section will expand while the cold sections stay rigid. The stress will crack the entire wall along its natural weak points. Jake worked methodically, heating different spots in a careful pattern. His furnace was running low on fuel, but he only needed a few more minutes. Cracks began appearing in the ice wall as thermal stress built up. This is impossible, Professor Zixtal said. That ice wall has stood for millennia. Maybe it has, Jake replied, but it never faced a human engineer with a portable furnace and knowledge of thermal dynamics. The cracks spread faster as Jake continued heating strategic points. Soon the entire wall was covered in fracture lines. Jake made one final modification to his furnace, removing all safety controls to create maximum heat output. Stand back, he warned. This is going to be spectacular. Jake directed all his remaining fuel into one massive thermal pulse aimed at the center of the cracked ice wall. The heat was so intense that steam exploded outward in all directions. The thermal shock was too much for the stressed ice to handle. The 50-foot wall shattered like glass. Chunks of ice crashed down as the barrier collapsed completely. Beyond the wreckage, Jake could see daylight from the cave entrance. Impossible, Professor Zixtal whispered. Not impossible, Jake corrected, as they climbed through the ice debris. Just difficult. And humans specialize in making difficult things look easy. They emerged from the cave into the frozen landscape outside. Their transport ship waited where they had left it. Jake used his suit's emergency communicator to contact Galactic University security. This is student Jake Morrison reporting a crime. In progress on Kepler 442c. Professor Zixtal has been conducting illegal experiments on students. We need immediate assistance. Within an hour, security ships arrived and arrested the professor. As they led him away, Professor Zixtal looked back at Jake with his crystal eyes. How did you know you could escape? The alien asked. Jake smiled. Because my grandfather taught me the most important lesson about survival. Humans do not survive by being the strongest or the smartest. We survive by being too stubborn to quit. The alien students gathered around Jake as they waited to board. The rescue ships. They had witnessed something amazing, human ingenuity and determination overcoming impossible odds. "Your species is remarkable," Valona said. Her rock body glowed with warm orange light. "You turned a death trap into an engineering challenge." "That is what humans do," Jake replied. "We look at problems that seem impossible and ask ourselves one simple question: how can we make this work?" Later, Jake's snow furnace design was studied by engineers across the galaxy. The Galactic University implemented new safety protocols to prevent illegal experiments. Jake received offers from dozens of institutions who wanted to study human problem-solving techniques. But Jake was most proud of a simple message he sent to his grandfather back on Earth. "Used your ice cave survival lessons today, Grandpa. They worked perfectly. Thanks for teaching me that humans never give up." The galaxy had learned an important lesson about human nature. When faced with certain death, humans do not despair. They build furnaces out of spare parts and melt their way to freedom. They refuse to accept defeat, even when defeat seems inevitable. That stubborn refusal to quit had saved 5 lives and would inspire countless others across the stars. Professor Zixtal's experiment had failed, but it proved something far more valuable: that human determination could overcome any obstacle no matter how impossible it seemed.